What's up, everyone? This is Swagadon with Swagger Gaming, bringing you a quick guide on the Discipline Priest Mage Tower Challenge. Just a quick disclaimer, I do not know how to properly play a Discipline Priest in a raid or dungeon setting, and I will not pretend that I do. The talents, rotations, and other information in this guide are solely for the Mage Tower Challenge and are just what worked for me. If you have any suggestions that might help out other players with this challenge, please feel free to comment below. For the Discipline Priest, you must complete the Fell Totem's Fall scenario, which requires you to defeat Tugar Bloodtotem and his giant worm friend. This fight is broken up into two repeating phases. The first phase, Tugar will follow you around, smacking you in the face, and his worm friend will be sitting over the edge of the cliff, hitting you with ranged attacks. In this phase, you will need to deal with a couple of abilities from each of the mobs. Tugar will cast his Fell Burst ability, which is going to be the main mechanic of this fight. You'll want to save Fear for this, as it hits super hard and seems to increase in damage every time his cast goes off. You will typically only be able to Fear every other cast, so this acts as a softened rage because eventually it will one-shot you. For the times you can't Fear him, just make sure to be topped off and shield yourself. You should save your Power Word Barrier and Pain Suppression for later in this fight, as the encounter is typically not longer than about 5 minutes. The other abilities you will have to deal with in Phase 1 are the X, the Fell Surge Totem, and Sonic Burst. The X is simply a ground mechanic you will need to move out of. An X of green swirls on the ground will form, and you have plenty of time to reposition. Tugar will also cast his Fell Surge Totem, placing a totem on the ground somewhere that will start a cast. If this cast goes off, you will be stunned for a short duration, and will most likely succumb to another mechanic. These can easily be one-shot with Purge of the Wicked, so just keep an eye out and make sure you use the global cooldown to kill them. Lastly, the worm will cast Sonic Scream. This is a cast that silences and does a moderate amount of damage, but is just mostly an annoying mechanic and can easily be avoided. The second phase will happen quickly once the fight has started, and then intermittently throughout the encounter. The worm will burrow into the ground, and the encounter has all of the same mechanics in the first phase except for the Sonic Scream. Tugar will cast Earthquake, and several rocks will fall from the ceiling and land on the ground, followed by 2 or 3 eggs depending on how far you are into the fight. The eggs will have a cast bar, and if completed, will spawn little worms that will shoot acid at you. You should be able to defeat the eggs before they hatch, but if not, the little worms are easily killed off. The large worm from Phase 1 will be burrowing around, and if it hits you, you will become stunned for a few seconds. This is not an automatic wipe, but will put you behind, and when combined with Fell Burst can easily kill you. When the worm starts to charge you, quickly move behind one of the rocks on the ground, and he will run into the rock, breaking it and removing a stack of his armor. This will increase the amount of damage he takes throughout the fight, which is important as you need to defeat both Tugar and his worm friend to beat the encounter. Here are my talent choices for this fight. For Tier 1, I chose Schism for the extra damage. I know the first couple of attempts I had trouble remembering to even cast it, so I think Castigation could be a good choice here as well for a more passive approach. For Tier 2, I took Masochism for the extra healing and damage reduction. You can cast Shadow Mend on yourself before a Fell Burst hit to get your 10% damage reduction, and this will add up over the fight, but is also not completely necessary. I found that the extra movement speed from Angelic Feather or Body and Soul is not needed on this fight, but I recommend you choose the talent you are most comfortable playing with from this tier, as it is not really a clear choice. In Tier 3, Psychic Voice is almost mandatory. You'll need the cooldown reduction to be able to Fear Tugar when he casts Fell Surge, and the other 2 talents on this tier do not help with the encounter anyways. For Tier 4, I took Mindbender for the extra damage and burst mana regen. Shield Discipline can be an okay choice here as well. I think it technically will give you more mana regen over time, but I found myself saving my shield for Fell Bursts, which will counteract this talent. In Tier 5, I think Sanctuary is probably the best choice. It is passive and will increase the amount of absorption you get from your smite. Stacking this Smite Absorb with Shadow Mend damage reduction can really help for Fell Bursts. Clarity of Will can be okay here as well, as it can be nice to have the Absorb shield, but it also has a 2-second cast time, meaning you will really need to watch your timers to use it correctly. For the last two tiers, I took Purge the Wicked and Power Infusion simply for the damage increases they provide. Gear-wise, there's not much to tell. I was 903 eye level with no tier bonuses from Tomb or Antorus. For legendaries, I only had the Insignia of the Grand Army, which is the free ring from defeating Argus, and increases the effects from the Nether Crucible by 50%. I did have my 66 points in my weapon, so I was able to get the full benefit from this ring. I did not use any specific macros or Weakauras for this encounter, but Bigwigs includes timers, so I was able to see when things were going to be cast. I do use Ipse's Priest Weakauras in my UI, which can be found in the link below. Overall, I would say that this encounter is probably the easiest one out of the 7. Once you're able to figure out the mechanics, you should have no problem grabbing your new weapon appearance. The Disciplined Priest plays a bit differently than the DPS classes that have this challenge, but I think learning the different playstyle adds to the enjoyment of these challenges in general. What class or spec would you like to see a guide for next? Let me know in the comments down below, and have a great one.